everyone, and welcome back to Color Art Emotion. Today, I thought of doing a quick and loose watercolor painting. It will be more in the urban sketching style, so very quick and spontaneous. And I'll walk you through the entire process, so let's start! And by the way, this video is very close to real-time speed, so hopefully it will be very easy for you to follow. So, this is a corner building from Stockholm and it's located in Södermalm, which means the southern island, but it's actually very central in the city. And for sketching this corner building, I will be using first a mechanical pencil and later a fountain pen. So here I'm taking my mechanical pencil, and by the way you can find a link to all my supplies in the description below. And I'm also taking a quick look at my reference picture. The first thing that I'm looking at is the total height, so from the roof line to the door's threshold. And as you see, I'm putting two marks on the paper that symbolize the total height. So now that I've placed more or less the total height, I can take a look at how many levels does this building actually have and try to divide the height of my sketch accordingly. So as you see, the building has 5 floors in total and the ground floor is a bit higher as we have a nice pub here. And now it's time to place the horizon line, and for that I look at what height are the heads of the people in the composition, and this is because I was also walking when taking this picture, so the horizon line has to be around the height of a person standing. Now that we have the horizon line in place, we can look at the vanishing points of this two-point perspective and suggest a few converging lines that symbolize the levels of the building. This is just a first interaction with the building, so the exact placement on the paper might change a bit further on in the sketching process. And as you see, my pencil sketch is very light. It's more about getting familiar with the building and gathering information about the scene. Now I've changed from a pencil to a fountain pen. I'm using my simple Lamy Safari fountain pen that is filled with black waterproof ink, special made for fountain pens. And I'm starting with placing the levels, and as you see, I build on top of the pencil sketch and further refine it, looking again at the dimensions, proportions, and readjust some of them where needed, for example the height of the levels. I'm also placing the tree, and I'm doing this now because I don't need to sketch the elements of the building behind, so that's why it's good to sketch it quite early. I'm also placing the awnings of the pub, as the ground floor will be the area in focus. That's where most of the lights are and where most of the people are. Then, I'm also suggesting the underside of the balconies, and as they are placed further up, we get to see more of their underside as they follow the perspective. So here I'm suggesting the edge of the pedestrian side and the street crossing area. Notice how all these lines converge to the same vanishing point on the horizon line. And now I'm getting in a few more details on the corner and also sketching the balcony doors. Now, what's important when sketching these doors or windows is not to forget to suggest their depth. I will also do this in a few moments. So as you've noticed in many of my videos, I try to share with you my tips on sketching in perspective and building your freehand perspective. Perspective can be a very vast subject, especially if you need to learn its technical part. But for quick freehand sketches like this one, I think you only need to apply a few basic concepts to make your sketches believable. I also try to suggest a few tables or just to induce the idea that things are happening under the awnings. So I'm just making a few catchy marks. And I think this is enough for the sketching and we can start the painting part. So let's start with watercolor painting. For this watercolor painting, I will be using only a few colors taken from my Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor set. And I will try to keep this watercolor painting quick and loose. So I started with a bit of cadmium yellow on the lighted area above the awnings. And I'm also adding a bit of cadmium orange under the awnings to suggest the warm light coming from the outdoor heaters. And while this part of the paper is still wet, I'm adding a bit of Indian red and letting it spread around. Indian red is a bit opaque and has an earthy red color, and it is also very strong pigment as you see. I'm also painting the awnings with a bit of indigo, and I like a lot how the colors combine. I think this indigo is quite light right now, so I will be coming over with more pigment a bit later on. Now, I also want to focus a bit on the upper part of the building. And I start by going over it with my wet brush. And in the brush there is just a bit of cadmium orange and water. I'm making a new mix to paint the facade of the building, so I take a bit of Indian red again and I mix it with raw sienna, and raw sienna is more transparent. And while the facade is still damp, I'm coming over with this mix and trying to go around the windows and leave some of them white. To suggest the shadow on the underside of the balconies, I'm using only indigo. And because the facade is still a bit damp, the indigo combines nicely with the Indian red. Now I'm also coming over the awnings as I mentioned before. So now we can leave this part of the building to dry a bit, and in the meanwhile we can focus on suggesting the street. And for the street, I first add a bit of water on the lower part of it and around the crosswalks. And then I come over with a bit of indigo. I'm not creating an even wash because I want to have sort of a gradient so that it's lighter closer to the building and darker further away, closer to us. This will make the ground floor of the pub seem that it's creating a lot of light around it. And as the underside of the awnings started to dry a bit, and now it's only a little damp, I tried to suggest a few silhouettes, maybe a few people sitting at the tables and the shadow under the tables. Just a few shadows in the light. From distance, to make it read as if there are many things happening there. But I keep this part very loose. I don't try to really draw every little part exactly as it is in the reference picture. I'm just trying to induce the feeling of things that are happening in that area. So now I want to paint the tree, and I start by mixing a green. I'm using a bit of indigo with raw sienna and cadmium yellow. And I also add a bit of Indian red to the mix, but I think I've added a bit too much. So I'll try to fix it by adding again blue and yellow. Now I can go over the entire tree with this mix, and sometimes come over with a bit more yellow or a bit more blue, just to get more color variance and not to have just a flat colored shape. Adding a few more colored dots under the awnings, and I think it's time to let this sketch dry a bit. So now I want to suggest a few more details and add more contrast to the painting. And this time I will be using my Duke Fude fountain pen that is filled with the same black waterproof ink. So I'm adding a few dark marks here and there. I also want to suggest the railings of the balconies. And the idea is just to add a few more details, and not too many, but a few more to increase the contrast and better define a few parts, especially in the focal area. What is nice about this pen is that you can get both very thick and very thin strokes, depending on what side you are holding the pen. So I'm also adding texture to the awnings and suggest a few more details on the pub, like the entrance sign and the menu signs, and somehow even a name. It's just to suggest a bit more atmosphere. I want to create more atmosphere, and here I have my Winsor & Newton white gouache, and I'll be using it with a toothbrush to create a few splashes at the ground floor around the pub. So I just added this toothbrush in the water and then took some white gouache and started to create these splashes. And I also add a few orange splashes because I want more warmth. I think these orange splashes will make the pub feel really warm and cozy. I'm again taking my round brush and I'm adding a few orange lights. As you see in the picture, there are some lights hanged around this pub, so I'm sort of suggesting them, and I think they really create a nice atmosphere, and they also create a connection with the neighborhood because they go a bit outside the frame, and in this way you are kind of tempted to think that things are happening also on the other side of the street, even if we don't really see it in the sketch. So now I also want to represent a few figures, a group of 3 people having a nice chat in front of the pub. This will also give a scale to the sketch, and they also make the place feel more dynamic and more alive. So I'm just loosely sketching them. I'm also adding a few highlights with white gouache. And to ground them, also I'll suggest a small shadow. And as the light is coming from the pub, the shadow will be in our direction. And this was our quick and loose watercolor painting. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. please let me know in a comment below. And if you're new to this channel and enjoy watercolor painting and urban sketching, consider subscribing to Color Art Emotion, because here you'll find many videos on these subjects. Now, take care and see you in the next video.